Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delay and welcome to the March 10th Glendale City Council meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Council members: Devine.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Jarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Sinanian.
Here. Today's flag salute will be led by Councilmember Devine.
Thank you. Stand. Place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for this evening's invocation. This weekend past, we marked International Women's Day and gave praise to the women in our lives who have and continue to make an impact in the world and in our lives every day. One such woman, Eleanor Roosevelt, was one of America's greatest leaders, an outspoken advocate of the working class, women, minorities, and others whose voice was often ignored. She paved the way for other outspoken women to enter the political arena and make an impact. She once said that, quote, "One's philosophy is not best expressed in words, it is expressed in the choices one makes." As someone whose philosophy emulated all that is right with our country, the values and principles of freedom, of equality, suffrage, and defending civil rights and dignity, let us use Eleanor Roosevelt as a shining star to guide us through our council deliberations and in our everyday lives. Let us pray that our choices will reflect the best values and principles of our great nation. And lastly, let us praise and give thanks to all who serve in our nation's armed forces who are putting their lives in danger so that we may enjoy our lives in safety and security, particularly the more than 200,000 women in active duty military, including 69 generals and admirals who serve our nation proudly. We pray for their safety and that of their families tonight and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. May we have the report, please?
The agenda for the March 10th, 2015 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, March 5th, 2015 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. What's next?
3A is agenda presentation. Under 3A is agenda preview for the meeting of Tuesday, March 17, 2015.
Thank you. Ms. Beers?
Mayor Sinanian and members of the City Council, for the March 17th, 2015, our regularly scheduled Council, Housing Authority, and Housing Authority meetings have been canceled. However, on March 24th, we do have a meeting to commence at 3 p.m., and that is our special meeting of the Glendale City Council to have our work boot Tuesday, and that afternoon we're going to be going to the police community room to talk about police operations and services, and that will commence at 3 p.m. At the police community room on March 24th. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Beard. Next item, please.
3B is a proclamation designating the month of April 2015 as Armenian Genocide Commemoration Month.
Thank you. And we have a body that is going to receive the proclamation from the City of Glendale. If I can ask you to come forward. I don't know if you want to go first or council.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I'm Talin Yakubian. I'm the co-chair of the Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee.
Garo Gazarian, co-chair of the Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee.
Okay.
Lena Bazoyan, I'm executive secretary of the Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee.
Good evening, Gary Kanjan, member of the committee.
Very well, good evening. We actually have a speaker on this item, which is unusual. Yes. You waive your... Thank you, Mr. Arpetian. Well, welcome. I can say so much about this subject matter because I'm a grandson of a genocide survivor on both sides. It so happens that my maternal side is a survivor of the earlier 1896 Hamidian massacres of Mush. My grandfather is a survivor of the Armenian genocide from Partizak outside of Istanbul. And this issue is hard to put aside. It's very hard. Every time that I try, something reminds me of where we come from and how we came to be here and what's out there waiting for us. Just last week, found out that the city of Carson was going to actually install, they called it accept a gift, but in reality it was to install a monument to Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who's the creator of the modern Republic of Turkey. In reality, he is the individual who brought the Armenian genocide to a conclusion in the worst possible way by making sure that an entire ideology of denial, an entire ideology of institutionalization of the results of the genocide took core and took roots in Turkey, and we're living with it today. Glendale is a very special city in many, many, many ways. One of the ways is that a large portion of the population, a significant portion of the population, are composed of Armenian Americans. Overwhelming majority of them are actually descendants of the survivors of genocide. So today we have a proclamation from the mayor's office, but I'm hoping and I'm certain that my colleagues join me in this proclamation proclaiming the month of April Armenian Genocide Commemoration Month. And this year is obviously very special because it's the centenary of the Armenian Genocide. April is a symbolic month. April 24th is a symbolic date because the Armenian Genocide really started in late February, early March, but it is on April 24th that all the intellectual, political, religious leaders of the Armenian community were arrested in Istanbul, and all but, I believe, 2 of them were executed, which was the beheading of the Armenian community really made it easier to accomplish it. So I'm happy to read the proclamation unless one of my colleagues would like to chime in. Okay, I'm going to read the proclamation to the record. Whereas the city of Glendale is home to the largest community of the Armenian Americans in the United States and is one of the centers of Armenian culture outside of the homeland of the Armenian people. And whereas the Armenian community has participated in and greatly enriched our city through contributions in many professional fields, including but not limited to the world of business, arts, culture, entrepreneurship, architecture, sciences, engineering, education, and government. And whereas many in Glendale who are of Armenian descent lost a significant number of family members belonging and heritage in the Armenian genocide between the years of 1915 to 1993, when over 1.5 million Armenians were massacred and displaced from their ancestral homeland, and the survivors fled to create a global diaspora. And whereas the Republic of Turkey, a successor to the Ottoman Empire, carries out a proactive campaign of genocide denial of this horrendous crime against humanity and attempts to erase its memory from the historical record, and whereas 2015 marks the centennial of the beginning of the Armenian genocide and marks a dark anniversary for those who survived but had to endure the loss of loved ones in the deserts of Syria and the countless Armenian towns and villages in Western Armenia. And whereas the people of good conscience around the world are united in their effort to work together, we appreciate the efforts of the community volunteers in organizing the Week of Remembrance to commemorate and recognize April 24th as Armenian Genocide Day, and urge our representatives and elected officials in Washington, D.C. to do the same. Now, therefore, I, Zara Sinanyan, proclaim April 24th as Armenian Genocide Commemoration Month and invite all members of the community to learn more about the Armenian Genocide and participate in the activities and events of the Week of Remembrance. Thank you. I don't know if you would like to say a few words, or should I present you with the... Anyone would like
Why don't we all, let's all join. Let's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Members of the City Council, Mayor Sinanyan, we are touched and honored by this display of solidarity with the Armenian community that resides in Glendale and beyond, and we thank you on behalf of the Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee and all of its entities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is one thing that binds quite a few Armenians, and that is very similar to what the mayor relayed a few moments ago. My grandmothers were orphans of the genocide, yet today I have the pleasure to be a resident of the city of Glendale a city like no other that does the right thing for the right causes. And on the eve of the Armenian Genocide Centennial, as we begin to commemorate the 1.5 million martyred souls, we also are very mindful of the Americans of 100 years ago who went out of their way from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by rendering aid to the Armenian orphans in the Near East. And it is those orphans' grandchildren who are today the residents of the city of Glendale. I thank you, I thank your predecessors, and I thank each and every one of you for this wonderful, wonderful, humane gesture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to give you one of each one of these special pin that has been designated for the centennial event.
Thank you. Oh, should we have the clerk? Or not?
No.
It's not.
No.
It's not.
Can I say?
Of course, yes.
Thank you so much. I've wanted one of these. I adore them, and I'm so happy that you're all here and that we will celebrate this centennial together.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Friedman.
Thank you. Well, as a non-Armenian, I want to thank all of you because I am so proud every April, and particularly this year, of being able to be representing such a wonderful Armenian community. And the work that you do is not just for Armenians. It helps to educate everybody about what happened, which is so essential. And if it helps at all in terms of eventually getting the Turkish government to admit to what happened, then so much the better. But just all of the efforts that you do each and every year is really enlightening for the whole country, and no other city does it the way that Glendale does. And it's because of your hard work. And I want to just tell people that there's so many events going on that cover the Armenian genocide and also other genocides and inhumanity through man throughout April. And beginning just this week, because we couldn't wait to start early, at the Brand Library at 6:30 on Saturday night, there's a wonderful opening exhibit of art that relates to the Armenian genocide and man's inhumanity to man and genocides. And I hope that everybody will attend this opening. And if you can't make the opening on Saturday night, please attend. The exhibition will be open, I believe, through April. And there are many, many other events. And where can people see a listing of all of the activities? Is there one central place that folks can go to see all of the things that are happening?
Yes, Mayor Sinanian and Councilwoman Friedman. The website for the library has an extensive calendar. They have an extensive mailing and social media platform that's announcing most of the events that the city departments are hosting. Dan Bell in our office is working with the Genocide Committee, and they're currently putting the list of calendar of events together. And when that's done, we'll also be posting that on the city calendar. And
then what about on GTV6? Can we run some sort of a PSA that announces all of our events and run through the schedule?
Yes, in fact, again, with the chair, which would be Mayor Zari Sinanian and co-chair Ar Najarian, they're scheduled to do a PSA with GTV6 that will announce, if not all, most of the events.
Perfect. Thank
So,
you.
Mayor, may I very briefly? I neglected to mention what Sergeant Lorenz just briefly spoke about. The Armenian Genocide Centennial Committee is fortunate to be collaborating with the City of Glendale this year for the Alex Theater event, which every year the City of Glendale undertakes to commemorate the genocide. And I want to say on behalf of the Genocide Centennial Committee that we are delighted and we are so pleased with the efforts of Mayor Sinanian and co-chair Council Member Najarian and the staff with Dan Bell and everybody else. We've been meeting here in this building on a regular basis. In terms of the question that you had as to where one can see all of the events, for the Genocide Centennial Committee's events, and there's quite a few of them, it's marchforjustice.org will have all of the events. Also, AGCCW USA will have all of the events. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do echo your remarks None of us would be here if there was not a genocide. It is the genocide that propelled the orphans and the widows across the globe, South America, North America, Australia, throughout Europe. But I think it's fair to say, and I'm very proud, that Glendale has become a ground zero for genocide commemoration. We have both of the co-chairs of the regional Centennial Genocide Commemoration are here. Much of the committee is from Glendale. We have worked hard these years as a city to make the genocide come to the forefront of people's consciousness. And the good news is that there are cracks forming in the walls of denial. And those cracks are getting bigger and bigger every day. Even in Turkey, intellectuals are questioning the denialist regime and the denialist position. And this is great momentum for this cause. And the cause is simply justice and let's say compensation for the 1.5 million lives that were lost. And I'm very proud to have presented this proclamation. And as Councilmember Friedman said, there are a wealth of events coming forward in the next month, in the next 6 or 7 weeks, actually. If you have not attended a genocide event, if those of you who are not familiar with it, there'll be plenty of opportunity to become accustomed to it and learn just a little bit about the tragic history of the Armenian people. So when the Armenians appear sad often, I think it's built into our psyche is that we have heard these stories of massacre and terrible atrocities that I can't even say in front of you all. We've heard it since we were young. It's something that we carry with us and that we've instilled in our children. But we're hoping that someday that the cloak can be lifted off of the truth by Turkey and we can all move forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Najarian.
I'll say a few words. As a native Glendalian and growing up not knowing who was an Armenian or what it ever meant, my first experience with Governor Duke Majan, I wondered what kind of a strange name is that? That was my introduction to Armenia. And since being here on the council, I've done a lot of reading back into the 1800s about Armenia, which you've gone through. All I can say is one day you're going to be recognized the way you should be. I don't know when, but it will happen. So it'll be a great month of a celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. That's it on this item, but we do have an action item which I'd like to take out of order. That's action item 8B. And this goes a long way towards Glendale's contribution for Armenian genocide recognition. It is Mr. Clerk, would you like to read it into the record?
Certainly. Mr. Mayor and Council, 8B is City Manager regarding support for recognition of the centennial anniversary of the Armenian Genocide Resolution, designating April 2015 as a month of commemoration of centennial anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, and taking actions necessary to ensure the city and its institutions, including schools, libraries, and publicly owned museums, properly commemorate, inform, and provide education about the genocide.
Thank you.
I'd be proud to move the item.
Thank you. Does the city have anything to say? Or?
You have cards.
I fear, sure, that I could not add any gravitas to this item. I would wholly defer to you and
Thank you.
Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Ochoa. We do have two speakers on this item, which I'd like to invite to the podium. Elena Satrian of the Armenian National Committee Western Region, followed by Tigranna Zakarian.
Honorable Mayor Sinanian, council members, staff, and community members. My name is Elena Satrian. I appear before you today to speak in support of the Armenian Genocide Resolution on behalf of the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for introducing and passing a commemorative resolution year after year, and for being the only city in the United States that has in the past hosted and sponsored a week of remembrance, educating its citizenry about the atrocities that took place during the Armenian Genocide of 1915. The city of Glendale now serves as a model for countless cities, schools, and college districts that are following in your footsteps all across the United States in doing the same. I'd also like to commend you for introducing a more comprehensive resolution this year that not only recognizes the Armenian genocide and calls on President Obama to do the same, but also commits the city and its establishments to host public awareness events and highlights extraordinary response by the American people, which ultimately saved the Armenian nation. This is a proud chapter in American history that is rarely talked about or taught. In March of last year, the ANCA Western Region launched an initiative called America We Thank You, an Armenian tribute to Near East relief, to recognize the outpouring of generosity by the American people during and in the immediate aftermath of the Armenian genocide, and to highlight the efforts of the Near East Relief, which was the first congressionally sanctioned humanitarian relief organization established under the leadership of President Woodrow Wilson. This organization evolved into the Near East Foundation, which became a model for later American governmentally sanctioned humanitarian aid projects such as USAID and the Peace Corps. Through various events and programs, America We Thank You expresses its gratitude to the American people for establishing and continuing the tradition of being the most generous nation. I'd like to take this opportunity to show a short video that we had prepared on America We Thank You. And again, thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Mr. Satrian.
No humanitarian cause in history has captivated the American nation as the Near East Foundation's efforts to bring aid to the Armenian genocide refugees, orphans, children, and women. For 15 consecutive years, from 1915 to 1930, the Near East Relief inspired a nation, as well as 49 other countries, to house, shelter, feed, and educate the most vulnerable half a world away.
Մերձավոր արևելքի նպաստամատույց, այսինքն Near East Relief, 3 ամերիկացի նախագահներ՝ Wilson, Harding եւ Coolidge, անխոնջ աշխատանք դարին հայ որբուքները ազատելու ցեղասպանութենեն ժողոբրած մազաբուրդ ազբզդիկ աշակերտները, ինչպես նաև ամերիկացի սենատորներ եւ կոնգրեսմեններ աշխատանքներ դարին հավաքելով 120 միլիոնի շուրջ, որ այսօրվա 2.8 միլիարդ դոլարի համեմատությամբ որբեսի հայ ժողովուրդը կոյադևե պատմությունը, որ մորցած են հայեր ու ամերիկացիները։ Մենք այսօր հայ թադի միջոցով այս պատմությունը 100-ամյակի շրջակիցան մեջ վեր կվերցնենք հիշեցնելու համար ամերիկացիներուն պատմությունը, ինչպես նաև հայերուն պատմությունը։
The ANCA Western Region launched the America We Thank You tribute to Near East Relief because Near East Relief is a very important and yet often forgotten part of American history, not only within the Armenian community but also by the American public. My own involvement in this project is a tribute to my grandmother, who was an orphan from the Armenian genocide and who spent several years of her youth in one of the Near East Relief orphanages. So I'm doing this in order to honor her as well as all those who helped rescue her and the other hundreds of thousands of Armenian orphans from the Armenian genocide.
I'm part of this initiative because I am personally a descendant of those rescued by Near East Relief. 3 of my great-grandparents were rescued by Near East Relief orphanages in Aleppo and Beirut.
My name is Nushi Karpanyan, and I'm the granddaughter of Siranush Tokmakjan, who was orphan number 720 in the Near East Relief's Ghazir orphanage. In her honor, in her memory, and for all those who survived, and for all the missionaries who helped the Armenian survivors rebuild their lives, I'm involved in this committee.
I support the organization because for the first time, the faces of those orphans have names. One of those names is Karzi Benohanyan, my grandmother, whom I recently found out was rescued by a saint called Miss Emma Cushman, a missionary from the United States, who dedicated her life to the orphans. My grandmother, Karzi Benohanyan, was one of those orphans rescued. Miss Cushman took her and her brother from Marzvan to Greece. From Greece, she followed the orphans to Egypt. Not wanting to be separated from the orphans, Ms. Cushman spent the rest of her life in Egypt.
My maternal grandfather was also an orphan who was rescued by the Near East Relief, and he would tell me that his happiest childhood memories were in the orphanages because that's where he got to learn English. He learned his skill of carpentry. He later became a very successful carpenter in Lebanon. He talked about the times he would play soccer with the other orphans in the orphanage, and even as I would listen to his story, I could see him kind of go back to that happy place because of all those American men and women in service.
The American people, through their efforts, changed the course of history in the early 20th century. I want to remind everyone that the current generation can and should follow the footsteps of people who were involved in the Near East Relief and the American citizens who helped.
This effort allows the American people to not only learn about Armenian history, but to learn about and honor American history.
The Near East Relief truly represented the spirit of our country.
Thank you for that great video. Tigrana Zakarian. 3 minutes.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Sinanian, council members, city management staff, and community members. My name is Tigrana Zakarian, and I stand before you as the Community Outreach Coordinator for the ANCA Glendale chapter. In the past few months since embarking on my new position and immersing myself in the passionate grassroots efforts of the Armenian American community here in Glendale, I have also gained the privilege of working with many of you present here tonight and better understanding the integral role each of you play in ensuring that Glendale continues to move forward in the most progressive manner that nurtures the livelihoods of all our residents. I would like to start off by noting that Glendale is home to the largest Armenian diaspora community and truly serves as a place for Armenian Americans to maintain their cultural identity while immersing themselves in the various ethnic communities that also give Glendale its reputation of cultural diversity that it rightfully deserves. We are now living in a time where the world is becoming more and more interconnected, and human beings no longer feel obliged to remain in a particular nation state due to ethnic or religious reasons. And global migration as well as immigration patterns are proving to be the forefront of key issues that impact local communities both in the United States and internationally. I highlight this reality to demonstrate the importance of continuing on the path of cross-cultural tolerance and, most importantly, achieving this reality through local advocacy efforts and education. What the City of Glendale accomplishes tonight in passing this resolution will designate April 2015 as the month of the centennial anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, undoubtedly will have a ripple effect and will serve as a ray of hope for all those who continue to be affected and are victims of genocide and mass atrocities worldwide. The Armenian Genocide is known to be, and is rightfully, the first genocide of the 20th century, but as history has proven, the crime of genocide is sadly not an Armenian-specific issue, as it continues to affect various communities from Burma to Sudan throughout the world. Many of those victims who have found refuge in Glendale alongside Armenian American residents who continue to engage in the struggle of advocating for the proper recognition and commemoration of our ancestral history. Honorable Council, it is with great gratitude for your demonstrated relationship and leadership that I urge you tonight, as you cast your vote and consider passing this initiative in light of the Armenian Genocide Centennial, please bear in mind the future generations of Armenian American youth and their counterparts as they prepare to take a stance in our world. I believe it is the hope of all of us here tonight that they will find their sense of mission, whatever that may be, in a manner that properly upholds their cultural heritage and prepares them to exemplify cross-cultural tolerance and diversity. On behalf of the ANCA Glendale and the broader Armenian American community, I thank the City of Glendale and its dedicated civil leaders for their continuous support in ensuring the proper commemorative efforts of the 1915 Armenian Genocide. It is with this great sincerity that I seek to maintain this partnership in order to continue raising awareness and extending educational advocacy for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also have more pins for those who didn't receive any.
We just personally received them. I think we have a motion, but before we go to vote, I do want to thank the ANCA Western Region and Glendale for spearheading the struggle for justice and genocide affirmation, because only through justice for those groups that have been affected by such heinous crimes can we prevent future crimes from happening. Yes.
I'd just like to also thank them for bringing to light the part that America played in the genocide. As a kid in school, I never learned this, and I think it's about time that our children learn what our part was, and that it was a noble part. And I'm so proud that we were there to help.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
We do.
Oh, we do. Very well. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Sinanian?
Yes, thank you. We're going to go back to the regular calendar now. Thank you very much for everything that you do and for coming.
Thank you very much. My committee was asking if we can have a picture with the City Council briefly.
Certainly. Yeah, would you like to come up here, please? That'd be great. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's great.
Squeeze together?
Yeah, squeeze together.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next consent item.
Next item is the consent calendar. Consent items, including minutes following routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before motion is proposed. Mr. Mayor, we do have a request to pull from the calendar item 4K.
I will do so.
And I would like to pull 4D.
4D has been pulled also. Will someone move the balance of the consent item?
I'm going to pull 4H.
Second.
May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman? Yes. Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Sinanian?
Yes. 4D, right?
4D. So I would like, if Jay Platt is here, to come up. I think he'd be the right person.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if I can read it into
please.
the record. Director of Community Development regarding South Glendale Historic Context. At D1 is a resolution appropriating $31,925.
I asked for this to be pulled because historic preservation is something that's very important to me, and this item is something that should be important to the preservation community, so I'd like to let the public know about what we're doing in South Glendale.
Great. As part of our pending South Glendale Community Plan, which will be the document that guides development in the entire South Glendale area for many years into the future, and that incorporates everything below south of the 134 freeway, we recognize that as we plan for the future, we have to think about what was built in the past and find ways to identify which of those things are important and which aren't. So current historic preservation practice calls for the creation of a document that's called a historic context, So we were able to receive $24,000 in grant funding from the state, which is federal money administered through the State Preservation Office, to produce 255 pages of really solid historical information about what's on the ground today in South Glendale. And the cost to the city for doing this was just less than $8,000 because it was offset by the grant funding. The Historic Preservation Commission has already reviewed this document and was thrilled with it. They approved it. And then when we're finished with the South Glendale Community Plan, this document becomes appended to it, so it becomes part of our ongoing document that guides development. And what a historic context does is help us identify which properties may be of historic significance by placing them in a specific context, such as single-family development, multifamily development, commercial development, and then identifies sub-themes. Those would be called themes, and then there are sub-themes that talk about different periods between the Depression and World War II, other times, so that in the future, when we have properties that may be threatened or someone is interested in developing, we can go to the context and give people a better idea if a property may or may not be significant. So it's going to be a really good tool for preservationists, but also for property owners, developers, for council in making its decisions, for the Historic Preservation Commission. So we're all very happy that the city did help fund this historic context. We will be doing other historic contexts in the future. We did one for the North Glendale Community Plan as well. And as we do our 2 future plans, we'll do the same thing. So then we'll have a full citywide historic context to guide development.
So I'm very glad to hear this. And given that we're doing a historic survey of commercial properties, a lot of which are in South Glendale, that'll go a long way towards we're not going to have a real citywide historic survey, but we're coming closer and closer. I want to make sure that we have a way of distilling that information down to individual property owners, real estate brokers, developers, so that nobody can say they've been blindsided by buying a property that they want to develop, and then, lo and behold, the city or the Historic Society or somebody uses this to say that the property is historic. I want to make sure that that property owners have this available so that they can do their disclosure when properties are put on the market. And hopefully it'll make everybody more aware of what is truly historic and what buildings we would like to maintain that context. And also, just as a planning document, to know what that balance is of maintaining enough so that we keep the integrity of areas intact while allowing, progress at the same time. So we need to really use this as a planning tool and make sure that things that are particularly significant are flagged in our system so that when permits are pulled for anything, a window replacement or anything else, even if the building's not on the historic register, it's flagged so that it can go through the proper channels to make sure that we don't unknowingly permit the destruction or alteration of something that could be a contributing structure. So can I be assured that that will be done?
Yes, the IS department is working with the Community Development Department on upgrading, kind of changing our computer inventory and database system for all kind of permitting and all sorts of things. It's called CSI. We're going to make it more user-friendly, similar to the ZEMAS system in Los Angeles, if you're familiar with that. It's going to be available to the public, and we are going to make sure that every property that's not just designated or in a historic district, but that's also been surveyed and viewed as potentially significant is flagged in that, so that anyone can open that up sitting at home in front of their computer and get that information. I don't know the time frame on that, but we've just started sharing with IS what we hope to do, and I hope it's sometime this year.
And what's our timetable in completing the survey and implementing everything you'd like to implement?
The request for proposals for the survey is going to go out this month. We'll have responses back next month. Hopefully the contract will be finished sometime in June, so I'd say June, July, we might have surveyors on the ground.
If there's no other comments, I'd like to move the item.
There's a question from Ms. Devine.
Well, I just wanted to know when people ask for a survey of historic homes and districts, is this the same thing?
No, historic context isn't a survey. It forms the kind of framework that you then take to do a survey. So when we do the commercial survey, this is going to become really valuable in terms of helping identify properties in that survey.
Very well, thank you.
I'll move the item.
Is there already a motion?
Second? Would you like a second?
Second.
Okay. May we have the roll call, please, on item D?
Council members Devine,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Sinanian.
Yes. Item 4K.
4K is City Attorney regarding reduction of news rack annual registration fee to 2013-14 level to permit study of revisions to fee. K1 is resolution amending resolution number 14-88.
Oh, yes.
By a point of
After.
okay.
There was
We have a
part
speaker,
submitted.
so we can take the speaker first. Mr. Don Margolin?
As
Did you
Mr.
read 4K, yeah?
Margolin comes up, I was referring to a point Mr. Weaver, I think, wanted to pull an item as well off the consent
very well.
agenda.
But 4K, did you read it in?
Yeah, yes. The item before you has been requested by council and I believe the speaker as well. News rack fees based on our cost study had moved from, I believe, $52 to $240. Council had directed that we amend by resolution the fee ordinance, which is what is here before you now on this calendar. That way we would take the fee back down to the original 52 and decide to which degree the council in the future would like to offset that cost, if at all.
Very well. Mr. Margolin?
Mr. Mayor, City Council.
3 minutes, okay? 3 minutes enough? Are 3 minutes enough sufficient time for you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council staff, I made a flyer, and it shows that there's approximately 239 news racks in Glendale. The only one I'm not sure about is LA Express, but I did find out after I made this that the home and land has 12 news racks also. But if there's 239 news racks at $241, which is the approximate amount that we were asking for, that would make it $57,600, plus the other 12 would make it over $60,000 for the year 2015. Under the $52, it would be approximately $12,428. I don't know why we would need to have almost $60,000 to monitor the news racks. It doesn't seem logical or fair. So I'm glad this is up for debate or is back on the agenda, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve it. And if we go back to 52, maybe next year we can raise it a small amount, but maybe 465% is kind of overboard.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to, another subject, thank you for these reports. I really like them, especially when I see that my water bill went down, my water went down by 44% from last year to this year. It's nice to see it when you're working towards something and having the electricity number 7. I've been 3 or 4, but 7's all right. But it's nice to see it, though. I really think it's good. Other cities don't do this. And I tell people about it, and they go, we don't have this. And I go, we do. Glendale's great.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you, Mr. Margolin.
We get complaints about
Right.
that, so it's nice to hear that people appreciate it.
Well,
I think it's great, personally, but
We can't be on this subject matter, unfortunately. It's great to hear that, but it's not why you came up to speak.
No,
It's
no,
not-
I just, the news racks. But this is also a great thing that you do. I think it's great when we're working towards a goal. It's
Thank
really
you.
good to accomplish it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're here to bring the rack fee down to its original amount until we figure out what the fair amount is.
Right, and I just have a few comments. I know Mr. Margolin, I think, said he has LA Weekly racks. And so that's, did he say something else? Pasadena Weekly. So there's quite a few other racks, a Realtor, LA Times, La Opinion, Daily News, Working World, LA Express, and, except for Mr. Margolin, I haven't heard any complaints from these other folks. What does bother me, though, is that some of these publications are free, and they're often just thrown not just on the rack, but at the doorstep in the public right-of-way of businesses, specifically on Brand and Central. That's what I've seen. So I'm not sure if any of our inspection costs are related to that effort to prevent that from happening. If not, they should be, I think, because I think it's all part of the same bundle of issues, the right to display, but also the reason the racks are there is to keep them in one place and not blowing all over town. So I know this is going to be brought back to us, but I just wanted to raise those concerns at the outset. So.
Okay, apparently we have one more speaker. I'll take him since he submitted part in a timely manner.
Order.
3 minutes.
Yeah, I am publisher Cole Maya for Professional Home Evaluation.
Will you announce your last name?
Yeah, Arista Kesyan. So almost 8 years, and from the newsrack fee from $10, it's come up for $240 technically during this period of time. And we are also planning our budget every year. So, and specifically, we need to pay right on the beginning of the year. So we have right now approximately 38 racks, which is we pay around $2,000 a year. Now we need to pay more than $8,000. So for us, only option to remove the racks from the streets because it's not affordable. Specifically, this one is free publication. We're not making money when we are distributing in the city of Glendale. And whoever comes in the city, the first they pick up real estate publication, most of it, to see what's going on in the city with the price and the properties. I mean, I guess this is perfect publication. We need to be out of it. If city go to continue, $245 per rock.
Okay, very well. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I would support lowering the prices on that if I didn't get these flyers at my front door every day when I would, in fact, I'd be waking up, I'd hear a noise at my front door, and I'd be very mad and angry and sometimes concerned, who's at my front door? And I would open it, it'd be a snowfall of different ads and flyers for realtors and gardeners and tree service and all that. So if we could come into an agreement with all those folks who distribute it door to door, I would gladly lower these rates so they are consolidated in boxes in the downtown area. Just a thought at the outset.
Mr. Ochoa, thank you, Mr.
I would only indicate to clarify something that the gentleman had mentioned, that they don't charge for these, but they are distributed for a private commercial purpose. And so to the extent that you set fees and you recover costs, generally when it's a private commercial purpose, you would recover most or even all of the costs, as that $241 does, or the council has the option from fee to support or not support different types of activity by virtue of how much the cost recovery is. In this case, Mayor Sinanian had in the interest of providing greater opportunity for print media to disseminate public dialogue and public debate, offered that perhaps it is not in the public's best interest to charge the full recovery, but rather to allow for something less. And while we figure that out, we would hold the fee at the original fee amount last year. That $10 to $20 to $40 to $50 was simply a gradual increase, but did not reflect the cost of doing the inspections and holding accountable the folks that actually sometimes or sometimes not maintain the racks themselves.
Very well, thank you. Do my colleagues have anything to add, or can we just move?
I'll move the item.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Devine,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Marion,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Sinanian.
Yes. Next item
is community event announcements.
How about 4F?
Sorry, it is the actually city council and staff comments.
Okay.
No, I would like 4F, please.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you.
I'm just for one second, just as a procedural step. So 4F, did we mention that 4F is pulled?
Yes.
We did. Okay, great. I just don't want to, having voted on it and then made a mistake.
No,
yes,
we
4F, please.
4F is Director of Public Works regarding Glendale Pavement Management System. F1 is motion authorizing to execute agreement with Omnis Inc. F2 is resolution appropriating $73,700.
And Mr. you don't have to speak on this. I know enough about it. I just wanted to comment. This is the pavement management system. Every 5 years, we go out and assess all the streets in Glendale, and we rank them from brand new to the worst there is. And then you get a composite score. quite often I talk about, when you leave Glendale streets and go onto Los Angeles streets as you start bouncing around. We put this index together. It's done once every 5 years. This year, we're up at over 74%. And getting anything over 72% is quite good. Very hard to maintain that because of how much money do you have to spend on street resurfacing, whatever. Our surrounding cities, Burbank and Pasadena, are both down at 66%. And I don't know what Los Angeles is, but I'm sure it's lower than 60. It's what?
62.
Ah, you found it. Okay, 62%. So we have to be proud of Public Works to make sure these streets are repaved. And understand, if you see a bad one out there, understand that we know what the street condition is, and it may be poor, but when we go to do it, we're also looking at the other improvements that have to go in with it or prior to it. Upgrades on storm drains, sewer lines, electrical lines, sidewalks, curb and gutter, ADA compliant. All of that goes in. The last phase is the paving. And you can look at South Glendale Avenue, or you can look at Kenyatta going north. They all went through that phasing. So it's a complex process, but they start with the worst ones and work the way up. So I just wanted the public to know that. So I'll move the item 4F.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Do we have a second? Second. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Sinanian.
Yes. Next item, please.
5 is City Council and staff comments.
Okay, I'll start this time just because we have an unfortunate incident that took place in Glendale on Friday. I'm sure probably all of you have heard about this. A 4-year-old kid ran onto the street in South Glendale, close to Olive and Wilson's on Wilson Street. And she died, unfortunately. And here we are again having to deal with a fatality stemming from traffic and pedestrian issues. Very unfortunate, not only because the child passed away, but because no matter how much we try to do, our city tries to do, our police department, no matter how much resources we throw at it, it appears as if we're not making progress. And it's that appearance that's scary. It's not that we're not making progress, it's just the frustration that we all feel in not having been able to prevent something like this happening. And I don't know, I'm sure my colleagues share the frustration and the sorrow that we feel for the family of little Violeta Khachaturian, who died on Friday night. I would like to have our police chief here, but I know he's not. He's at a conference, so if I can request Carl Povolitis to come to the podium. Good evening.
Good evening.
Any report or anything on this that you'd like to share with us?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Carl Povolitis, Deputy Police Chief. I'll take a few minutes and just sort of recap the incidents on this tragic situation. Obviously, everybody's very aware that at about 4:54 on Friday afternoon, we received a call of a traffic collision involving a pedestrian near Olive and Wilson Avenue. And as the officers were responding, it was updated that it was a hit and run, that the driver had not remained at the scene to render aid. The first officers to arrive found 4-year-old Violeta Khachaturian unresponsive. 2 of our officers began to provide CPR. The fire department obviously also responded and transported her to Glendale. It is possible that unfortunately she passed away. As I said, that in itself is tragic, but then we also obviously began our investigation because the driver wasn't there. And I'm sure you all saw the outreach to the media with Tom Lorenz and the push to figure out who the driver of the vehicle was. And obviously our investigators began the long night of working through every other piece of evidence that they could find, and ultimately started to narrow down what kind of vehicle that we would be looking for. By Saturday midday, the driver surrendered himself to the Glendale Police Department. Our investigators again responded, conducted their interviews, and after conducting those interviews, ultimately arrested Mr. Shant Badlian for hit and run. He has subsequently bailed out while we continue the investigation. All I can say right now is that the investigation, preliminarily, I mean, this is a tragedy, beyond words. None of us can really express probably what we truly feel. And anything involving young children, as I said, I've seen it shake some of the toughest police officers that I know. In this case, it really does appear that the 4-year-old ran out between two cars and into traffic and was hit. And although we've made an arrest, obviously our investigation doesn't stop there. We're still in the process of an ongoing investigation where we're evaluating the forensic evidence and doing the accident reconstruction. And I guess the last thing is, obviously on behalf of all the men and women of the Glendale Police Department, it said this is such a tragedy. Our hearts go out to the Khachaturian family, and they are certainly in our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you. On Friday evening, I know that Councilmember Najarian was one of the first people that actually went to the scene. I also went to the scene later on that evening around 10 p.m. and spoke with the parents. I was able to speak to the father. The mother was inconsolable and could not be conversed with, unfortunately. And through conversations with the family members and neighbors, it became clear that this family has several difficulties in their lives. Their other child, who's approximately 7 years old, is a special needs child, wheelchair bound with autism, and they're economically severely challenged to the extent where they would have difficulty meeting the expenses associated with the funeral and anything else associated with the death of the child. So our police were the first to respond by announcing and putting out information out there that they will be accepting contributions to their trust account so long as they're designated for Violeta Khachaturian. I personally took charge of raising funds on this issue. Thanks to Shan Sahakian, who provided the technical expertise. We set up a crowdfunding account, which I promoted on Facebook, and I'm looking at the account right now. We have currently raised $38,085, which will be more than sufficient to cover the funeral expenses. Hopefully that provides a level of, it's not going to console anyone, but some peace of mind, at least with respect to the funeral expenses. So the crowdfunding account is up and running. It's on CrowdRise, Violeta Khachaturian Memorial and Tribute Fund. It'll be up for probably some time, and all those that are interested in helping out are greatly welcomed, and you have my gratitude. Now, again, as much as we try to do, Mr. Ocho, Mr. Povolitis, it seems like these things happen. Just today we had a severe accident again. Earlier today, no death resulting from it, but some serious injuries, as the last time I read about it. And is there something that we're missing? Is there something that we need to do? Are we at the point where throwing police at the problem just isn't helping, where education through conventional means isn't having an impact? Maybe what we do is have a citywide, I don't know, like a ciclovia in Glendale, just shut down Glen Oaks Boulevard or Brand Boulevard and just promote the idea of having nothing but pedestrian and cyclists for a few hours on a major thorough street in Glendale. I don't know. Right now I'm trying to come up with things that could possibly work, and I think anything that'll prevent little 4-year-old kids from dying is worth it.
I think we are probably in the same boat that you are in terms of the engineering, the enforcement, and the education to the extent that it would appear you blink for literally a second and your child is not next to you. I don't know that education, enforcement, and engineering will solve that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try anything that just is out of the box and unconventional. But I think that you see it, I'm sure, as you drive around. I see it as I drive around. Folks will cut through the middle of a large, busy intersection or a large, busy block of traffic, phone in hand, and do things when they're adults that you know that they know better, and when they're children, you hope that hopefully that they are supervised in a safe manner. We will continue moving forward, and your suggestion is a good one. We will look at that alongside several of the other ideas that we previously have thought were maybe too avant-garde, quite frankly, because folks would say that they are shocking or test the bounds of what is acceptable for a city to do. But I think we're at a point as well where we're running out of the types of traditional or very customary things that cities do. Maybe it is time to do something that will be a little bit of a shock to the senses.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Friedman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for asking the captain to come up and speak. This was something that really shocked the whole community. And I mean, if there's one thing that we can take heart in, is that it did unite everybody, I think, in grief, and the fact that this crowdsourcing fund has raised so much money in such a fast amount of time is really a testament to the hearts of the people of Glendale. I will say that I received a phone call from somebody outside of Glendale before we knew we had a suspect in hand who offered to put up a contribution for a reward. And after I let them know that, thankfully, the gentleman had turned himself in, he then said, well, I'd still like to contribute money if you want a fund in Glendale to help further your educational efforts or to set up a fund for any future hit-and-run victims, God forbid we have any. He made that gesture, and I did want to bring it up and just let the council know that that's out there in case there's any interest in. Tonight's obviously not the time to discuss it, but I just throw it out, I guess, to those who are at staff who are dealing with this to see if that's of any use. And to generate that. So I'm happy to put you in touch with this potential donor, and if you want to begin that process, I can facilitate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Devine.
I'd just like to say that the loss of a child is always very difficult, but perhaps we can make it so that this child was not lost in vain, and set up a foundation or some sort of program where donations can be made so that we can offer to the police and for programs that will educate. On the other side of this issue, I have been hearing that there is progress being made as far as pedestrians and crossing. So the education component is working. Our education is focused on the elder Armenians, and as I understand it, from clergy and from police officers, they are actually crossing and holding out their hands and telling the cars to stop, making themselves visible. So the education program that the police force has in place is working. We just have to do more, and I think that making sure that this child did not die in vain would be I think a noble way of doing that.
Can I ask a question while you're there? And I'm sorry, and Mr. City Attorney, please stop me if this goes beyond council comments. I know we're having a long discussion about this, but I think it's important. I've noticed something recently just increasing, which is the amount of people jogging in the street. It used to be that people always jogged on the sidewalks, and all of a sudden, I mean, I'm not a jogger, all of a sudden it seems like the majority of joggers are jogging right in the street. And I've noticed it a lot on Kenneth Road and at night, and people not wearing reflective material. I see nodding. So other people who are driving on Kenneth, I think, are seeing the same thing, and it's a narrow road. I'm assuming it's legal. As dangerous as it is, can we do some education to show these people that they're not visible to cars? Because it's gotten pretty scary out there with joggers at night in dark, non-reflective clothing in the middle of the street, we're not expecting to have people jogging.
Yeah, because when you have a sidewalk, the expectation is on the side that you be on the sidewalk, and then if there
Right.
isn't a sidewalk, then you walk on the road, if at all possible, facing traffic. But as I said, it's a bit of a head scratcher. And doing some jogging myself, it has me kind of wondering why you're out in the traffic lane as opposed to up on the sidewalk. So yeah, I think that is one of the things we'll look at and see if we can do a little education, because as I said, it's if you can't be seen, it's all about visibility. And if I can just take a little non sequitur, at least on the preliminary, just a little bit of preliminary information from the traffic collision this afternoon with pedestrian. Some of the information that we got is that we do have distracted walking, although in a crosswalk, and it's still the driver's primary responsibility. It sounds like the person crossing may have been on the cell phone. That obviously, it's like driving; it distracts you from what you're doing and paying attention to what's going on around you. I'm sure we've all kind of experienced, if you've been on the cell phone and you've been walking, you almost walk into a pole or something because your mind is occupied. So again, getting that information out to everybody that we all need to pay attention to each other. And so the parts that are working where the community is educating the community is absolutely critical to the long-term success and improving pedestrian safety. It's us taking care of each other.
And I would only add that the bicycle patrols that we've been doing over the last 6 months actually have been, if you look at the productivity and the logs that we do, has been proving to be effective. It's just a matter of doing more of them.
Sure. Now, what would it take to have a pedestrian cyclist eventing? I mean, I think someone said we're waiting for Ciclavia to come to Glendale. Apparently, it's not going to come.
Ciclavia has met with me.
Okay.
More than once, and they want to come here.
But how long has it been?
No, it's a question, though, of cost. Ciclavia asks for a sizable financial commitment. Okay. I brought this to the city maybe 2 years ago, and I would love to have them here. It was just at the time, 2 years ago, given our budget, it was something like what was it, $100,000?
More than that. It was several $100,000.
$200,000.
If we were to do our own smaller event, would it cost less? And do it on Glen Oaks, just because it's the most notorious street for bad driving, for fast driving. And people, Glen Oaks and Western, notorious corner for pedestrians being run over.
What I can do for you so that we don't run too far afoul of the field of the Brown Act is to bring you back the staff write-up we had done on Ciclavia, because we did it in such a way that it was both evaluating that event as well as our own homegrown event, and looking at all the costs. So we can bring that to you.
So, but also compare that to the home cost, right?
That's what I mean, yes. Something that is under their banner, something we would do independently.
Okay, very well.
One thing I was going to bring up, which ties in, is I think we all received a petition from residents on Highland about speeding on Highland. There's speeding all over the city, and particularly I find it in hillside areas where people kind of get into a downward, they're going downhill and they start going fast, and some of the streets are very wide. Highland is not completely unique, but one thing is that Highland is a straight shoot to Glen Oaks. To Glen Oaks for a lot of folks, and to San Fernando, so it tends to be used more as a throughway, I think.
I'll tell you something else which adds on to the importance that Highland plays and the danger that it poses. It's also a street that a lot of parents and students that are going south towards like Mark Keppel and Toll and Hoover take.
Right.
People from Northwest Glendale take it. In the morning if you go there, cars are lined up, there's no parking space, people are walking, kids and parents are walking on sidewalks. So yes, it's a very important street. It's important to keep it safe.
Now, I've been following the discussions that the residents have been having, and there's some disagreement. Some people would like speed bumps, other people wouldn't, which is a common discussion that we have in a lot of areas. But I just want to be sure that Highland, the residents there, are being guided through the proper process to get some sort of traffic calming, because they desperately need traffic calming. I don't know which is the best method, but I think whatever will be the most effective, we should certainly employ, and sooner rather than later.
I had a conversation.
Sir, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, we're just getting a little too far afield on this. If there's a request to agendize something or for staff to follow up, but we're having a series of mini discussions about the same topic.
Okay, that's fine.
And we have our off the traffic safety grants, and so we will look and assess those in terms of tailoring the enforcement to some of the areas where we need it. We'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I can keep going, or I can allow you. Okay.
No, go ahead.
So on Sunday, I had the honor of visiting Clark Magnet High School. And our city manager was there as well. Our city clerk was there as well. And you may ask, why would you be at a high school on a Sunday. Well, the school was going through its Western Association of Schools and Colleges accreditation. So they had individuals from the association observing, come there to talk to the parents, to the alumni, and to some elected officials and staff from the city, and that was fine. But the most important part was that I got a chance to see their robotics lab, and what an amazing laboratory they have. And as amazing as the lab is in terms of the technology that is in there, the most amazing thing were our students. The kids who are part of the robotics club there are, they're unbelievable. They're unbelievable. They're so technologically advanced beyond their years. And I'm really, really proud and really glad that our city has a school like that with such a great program. Finally, I will adjourn today's meeting, and I'll request my colleagues to join in with me in the memory of Elsie Krikorian, mother of Glendale Unified School District Board of Governors member Greg Krikorian. She passed away approximately 10 days ago. In fact, last Tuesday was her funeral, and I'd like to read her bio for everyone. Elsie Manoukian Krikorian was born on May 13, 1935 in Cleveland, Ohio, to Bagdasar and Yernak Manoukian. She grew up in a small but loving home with her brother Shavash. She spent much of her youth with her girlfriends in blue-collar neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio, where she even lettered in her high school. But her youth was without grandparents and extended family. Her father, Bagdasar, lost a family, including his first wife and 2 children, as victims of the Armenian genocide. Her brothers and sister that Elsie never knew. Her mother, Yernak Atamian from Harper, lost most of her family during the genocide. Because of this, she was alone until she met her husband, John Krikorian, at an Armenian dance in Atlantic City. And they married short time later in 1956 and had 8 children: Richard, Diane, Nishan, Greg, Stephen, David, Tamara, and Ara. During this first chapter of her life, Elsie was a mother. She raised her family in a small house in New Britain, Connecticut, and then in Glastonbury, Connecticut. As the kids grew, she would lead the station wagon for annual trips to Armenia Week in Atlantic City, weekly AYF meetings at the Armenian Church in New Britain, annual trips to Camp Hyastan in Massachusetts, and trips to Old Orchard Beach, Maine. In 1989, Elsie and John moved the family to Glendale, California, in search of the Armenian dream for her children and grandchildren. Upon arrival, they created Business Life magazine and sister entities. She enjoyed her times in the office editing stories or spending time with her husband and son. But it was as a grandmother that she excelled, earning the loving name of Menzi to all of her 22 grandchildren. Despite the change from Connecticut to California, she continued her annual trips to the East Coast and AYF Olympics. Her house in Connecticut was open to friends and family alike. On April 6, 2013, her husband John passed away, and a month later, her brother Shavash followed. On February 22, 2015, she too passed away, but she's not gone. She remains in her children, her grandchildren, most importantly in her favorite son, Ara. Elsie is survived by her daughters, Diane Serafino, her husband George Serafino, and their children Sevan, Talin, Avo, and Rafi. Tamara Krikorian and her daughter Anita, her son Richard Krikorian, his wife Amaral Krikorian, and their children Aram and Harai. Nishan Krikorian and his wife Rubina Krikorian, and their children Seta, Suren, Sasun, Sosi, Greg Krikorian, and his wife Christine Krikorian, and their children Shant, Gayane, Armen, Seran, Haik, Stephen Krikorian and his wife Dera, and their children Hasmik, Zaven, and Shushan, David Krikorian, his wife Natalie Krikorian, and their children Datev, Vahen, Alec, and Ara Krikorian. In lieu of flowers to the family of John Krikorian requests that donations be made to the John and Elsie Krikorian Journalism Scholarship Fund at the Community Foundation of the Verdugos. Please make checks out to CFV with reference to Krikorian Journalism Fund. Thank you. We will adjourn in her memory. Any comments from my colleagues? Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Last week, about 11:10 in the evening, Mr. Mulhill made some comments about me up here. In fact, 5 minutes of comments saying I created all the financial hardships of the city all by myself, which surprised me. But I owe him an apology. I said that he put the letter into mailboxes, a letter, and Mr. Mulhill, I'm sorry, I guess he didn't want to hear me. He just went out the door. And I was wrong. He didn't put it in the mailbox because that would have been illegal under federal law. He put it on the porch. Where I was right is the 5-minute speech he gave here tonight is what he did put in the boxes or on the front porches of everybody, word for word. So I was right on that part, but I apologize, Mr. Mulhill, for saying you put it in the mailboxes. Secondly, up in North Glendale, I don't know, it's starting up again. I've had my yard signs stolen, I think 3 times over now. Paula Devine signs have been removed. Freeman for school board have been removed. Every time we're replaced, they're stolen again. I thought we were past that in this community. We had that a few years ago, where hundreds and hundreds of yard signs were taken away and dumped up in a canyon. And now it's starting again. You know, that's like stealing money, because every one of those signs costs more than $1 a piece for any of us to purchase. And then to take them, steal them, I don't know. But if I ever find, and I know people are looking for them, if we ever find out who it is, I will make sure that it's plastered all over creation, because it's just wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Okay, my colleagues have no more comments. Oh, you do?
Yes, I do. I'll make a couple of comments. I had the pleasure with my fellow council members to attend the Armenian International Medical Association Gala. This is such a fabulous group of medical personnel. They go to Armenia and operate on children with hearing problems, cochlear implants. I met a Dr. Ishiyama, who's gone 40 times to Armenia. They have done a total of 7,000 surgeries with 100% success. This was an amazing group of people, and I was so proud to be there. I also attended the Armenian Relief Society annual luncheon, and this is also an incredible group of women. They raise funds for local and global projects here and in Armenia. But in particular, I want to congratulate Seda Kajayan, who was a fellow Commission on the Status of Women member with me, who just learned today that she's receiving Congressman Adam Schiff's Woman of the Year Award. So it's congratulations to her. It's a great honor, and it's a privilege to know her. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Devine. You know what? I'll add one more, just because
okay.
we were, well, 3 of us were there. Glendale Education Foundation event.
Yeah. That was
4 of us.
4 of us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Mr. Nigerian was there. He had to leave early. That's right. Wonderful event, real fun event. A nice venue. It was just outside of Glendale, but it's okay. It was a really nice venue, and it seemed like everyone was there. But that's it. Thank you. Next item, please.
Mr. Mayor and Council, next time is community event announcements, 3-minute portion.
Thank you, and we have one speaker, Caroline Tofenkian. And friend.
Good evening, Mayor Sinanian, members of council. My name is Caroline Tufenkian, and I'd like to thank Councilwoman Laura Friedman for mentioning Life 100 this weekend at the Brand Library. And I'd like to stress that the public opening is actually Sunday, March 15th from 2 to 6. And I believe that everyone received an invitation. I hope to see you this weekend. at the Brand Library. Our committee would also like to thank the City of Glendale Library and Arts and Culture Department for their collaboration and support of this exhibition. Life 100 is a historic and a monumental exhibition in honor of the centennial of the Armenian Genocide. And the purpose of this exhibition is to celebrate survival, to celebrate life, which over the past 100 years has proven to be resilient and creative. The purpose is also to exhibit and to recognize post-genocide artists of Armenian descent who, despite their personal life challenges, have overcome and given back to the community, actually worldwide, because we have artists from France, we have artists from Armenia, so worldwide they've given back in a very creative way. So I invite you all to visit the Brand Library March 15th, 2 to 6, and as I said, it goes through May 1st.
And I'm Kathy Billings. I'm the supervisor at Brand Library, and I just wanted to take a moment to, again, invite everyone to attend our events. I want to commend Caroline Tufenkian and the Life 100 organizing committee who've worked for over a year to put together this incredible landmark exhibition, which we've been busy hanging all week, so it'll be ready for you on Sunday. In addition to the exhibition, we have a number of public programs that are, of course, free and open to the public. We have a couple of concerts, we have film screenings, and we have a symposium that highlights the healing that people go through post-genocide, not just Armenian community members, but members of our community from other genocide incidents around the world. And again, thrilled that the Library Arts and Culture Department can host these programs, and we hope you'll all join us. I'll encourage the public to pick up this postcard, which they'll see at any library location, and it does list on the back all of the activities related to the exhibition between the 15th and May 1st.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I hear from those in the know that this exhibit, Life 100, is incredible. So I'm so excited to see it, and congratulations on putting together an amazing exhibition.
Thank you. That's the last speaking card that we had.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if I may take a moment to make a brief announcement and also add that I also agree that the Life 100 exhibit is going to be quite a special exhibit. There are going to be artists featured like Arshil Gorky, the father of American Expressionism and abstract expressionism. That if you would want to see his artwork, you'd have to go to some of the best museums in far places, our nation's capital, some here in Los Angeles, but it'll be right here in our backyard of Glendale from private collection, so very exciting news. But for those who still have not purchased their tickets for the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast, Thursday, March 12, 2015, the Glendale Civic Auditorium at the bright and early hour of 6:30 a.m. Doors will open at 6 a.m. It'll be the 52nd annual Glendale Mayor's Prayer Breakfast tradition that has now gone on for 52 years, with a keynote speaker this year with Pete Arbogast. He is the play-by-play announcer and the voice of the USC Trojans, award-winning radio sports announcer and newscaster. We will also have musical performances by some of our local schools. Aaron Shaw and the Bagpipes. Tickets may be purchased in advance. In fact, you'll have just another day to purchase them. For more information, you can call 626-720-1088 or contact the Montrose Verdugo City Chamber of Commerce. It's $25, includes a free breakfast and an opportunity to hear Mr. Arbogast as a keynote speaker and attend this wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is under action item, the City Attorney regarding Internal Audit Division and Miscellaneous Code Cleanup. A1 is an ordinance for introduction.
With the indulgence of council, we would bring this to you as an introduction of ordinance for something that you are very familiar with because much of it operationally has been in the works for a little while now. As you know, internal audit is part of the management services family of departments. What this ordinance would do would be to allow it to move to the Department of Finance and reside there. Why? Well, we're doing a conversion of our Enterprise Resource Program, or ERP, The internal audit unit is heavily involved in that, as is the Department of Finance and the Human Resources Department, as well as ISD. And so this would provide greater ability for all of them to collaborate, at least through the interim period while the ERP is, we migrate to a new ERP, if that's where the request for proposal process leads us. So the work remains the same. We still have the audit committee doing the oversight. An internal audit manager will oversee the activity of the unit as they report back to the committee and, of course, report back to council on that quarterly basis. So if you have any questions, Mr. Elliott, Director of Finance, is here, as is Ms. Beers, or I can answer those questions for you.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't have any.
I do. So something just comes to mind. Isn't there an inherent conflict of interest? I mean, the risk of sounding like a troublemaker, but audit sort of is an oversight body, and they oversee finance. Now they're going to be under finance. It's just something's not right about
No,
that.
certainly we appreciate that. The internal audit function oversees all of our line departments, not just the Department of Finance.
Sure.
And so whether they reside in the city manager's office, you could argue there's a greater conflict there, because through my office you have direct line authority over all of those other operations. Or you have it as an independent unit within the Department of Finance. So they do have their own separated, segregated seating area within that operation. You still have the supervision of the auditors by an auditor, and they will still continue to do the performance and compliance audits. They don't do an audit the way an external auditor, for example, would, where it truly would be a conflict of interest if you were to have your external auditor coming and being a part of the city organization. That's why specifically you go outside. For somebody, I believe, who's our audit now? McGladrey? No, we've switched. BTD, we switch auditors on a fairly regular basis to preclude any of the chumminess that I think you're concerned about. To the extent that we are able to have a high-performing audit function, and to the extent that they work through the audit committee, I think we're able to abate, though recognize the dynamic that you voiced.
Now, there is a function that the audit department serves, right? They do an audit. I mean, at the end of the day, their function is to audit reports, audit numbers, I assume?
Well, they will audit any number of, they'll audit the CDBG committee. They will audit, they will do performance audits. They will do audits on our compliance, on contract compliance, purchasing, procurement, all of those types of things, regardless of where those operations may reside. They just got done with an audit in Hassan's shop for the cash accounting at the public counter. So they will do all that. Where the conflict that I think is that is being considered, it really comes from the work that an outside auditor would do, as opposed to your internal auditor.
Wait, but if the outside auditor is you're saying if there was something to catch, the outside auditor would be the one that would be catching it? I'll tell you, in light of what happened in Pasadena, I'm very wary of this stuff. So what exactly are we fixing here by bringing it under finance?
Well, a couple things. Since you referenced Pasadena, I can tell you that when that story broke, we did do a side-by-side comparison of their internal audit function, our internal audit function, and to the extent that it was an actual section, be it in management services or finance, many of the recommendations that they had hit upon, things that they felt that they needed to do, we already do. We do have those protections.
Like what?
The idea that we would not, for example, simply have a contract that gets routed around for signature, have one person take it to each one of you, have you sign it, and me, as the individual, gets to be there and possibly influence you, possibly change anything that you would have signed. Those types of controls are already addressed, and we have a protocol for that within this organization, within the operation. They do, as I say, a number of audits, some of them performance, some of them compliance, but that is distinct from what the external auditor would do. And Bob, you want to talk about external audit?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there's a distinct difference between the internal audit function and the external audit function. Internal audit has its own professional standards, which they adhere to. External clearly has their own code of professional ethics. Really, what this does is provide a lot of cleanup in the ordinance and gives, I think, a little better recognition to the independence of the operation as it exists.
The operative issue here at this point is the ERP migration, the Enterprise Resource Program. That is all of our the software. It's currently PeopleSoft. We have Oracle, the PeopleSoft system. We are asking to move in a different direction to probably what is going to be a tier 2 or something that's a little more generic, that is not a system that is utilized by Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies, because quite frankly we're not that big and we don't need that type of ERP. We can do with something that is a little more generic, a little off the shelf, and actually much less expensive. The migration to that new ERP is something that will take at least 3 to 4 years and will revolve around the Department of Finance, Department of Human Resources, ISD, and an internal audit. To the extent that you have the internal audit unit more completely functionally integrated with finance, that certainly will help with the migration on the ERP. The last thing I would leave you with is that at this point, to the extent that we have a high-performance internal audit operation, where they are now in management services, they are effectively an island, as you may hope and want. But the problem with that is that when you get to be to a certain level in that operation, there's really nowhere else for you to go. And the problem that we have, because we only have one city auditor, we have other principal auditors. But in the Department of Finance, there will be opportunities for those folks at some point to seek other professional development opportunities, as opposed to leaving Glendale altogether and be recruited by other organizations. So it gives us a number of things. Some professional development, gives us the opportunity to move ahead with the migration on the ERP and still provide the level of protections that I think you're going to want.
Okay, Ms. Friedman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this forward, because it's certainly very important, especially in light of Pasadena. It's a good reminder to us that we need to be vigilant. I had a discussion about this recently at the Airport Commission, because I sit on the Finance Committee, and there are 3 members from the Pasadena City Council who sit on the Airport Commission. So when it came time for us to hire a firm to do our yearly audit at the airport, this exact question came up in regards to Pasadena. And one of the comments that they made, the Pasadena representatives, that was very interesting was that what they had thought as council members an outside auditor did was not what an outside auditor actually does. That an outside auditor is not going to come in necessarily catch that kind of fraud. They really are looking at your processes at a very high level and not looking at the individual transactions that happen within that. I also sit on the Metropolitan Water District Board, where I represent Glendale. I'm the chair of the audit committee. And one of the things that I did that I'm going to throw out as something that the council might be interested in was, now at MWD we have an internal auditor the way that we do here at the city. And by the way, not every agency has that. I don't know that Pasadena had an internal.
They had an auditor, but not an actual unit.
Right, they didn't have a unit, and the airport doesn't have an internal audit unit either, or an internal auditor. But Met does, and they also hire external auditors yearly to go over their accounts. And one of the things that I had them do that might be of interest to us was I had them come in, both the internal auditor and the external auditor, to really explain what each function is and how they work in conjunction with each other, to educate my committee about the role of an auditor. If you're interested in that, I think I would suggest we do something. We have maybe Mr. Elliott and any external audit function we have come in and do it in an afternoon and just give us an hour overview. I'm not saying that the council's interested, but we might be, because the questions that you ask are questions that I think we could get into in more depth in a forum like that.
Me personally, I'm more interested in understanding more what our auditor does.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Because I've defended accounting firms for 9 years.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. I'm saying that we could have our auditors come in and really explain how they work on a month-to-month basis, how they, where they go, why they go there, what they do.
Okay. Sure. Anything to add?
I'd be interested to hear that.
Education.
Is anybody else interested in that? No? Okay.
I'm still though troubled, not so much by the fact that it may move there, but because I trust our departments, individual departments, whether it's finance or audit, but the explanation for it is a little off. I mean, so we're combining, or audit is going under finance because there's nowhere to advance for the department head.
That's one element. Not so much for the department head as much as it is for everyone within the unit.
Everyone within the department,
right?
Okay.
So there's that element of it. The driving force where this first came to the fore was the migration from a Tier 1 to a Tier 2. When you migrate over your human resources system, your payroll system, your accounts payable, accounts receivable systems, all of those things are tremendously complicated. And if you do them wrong, and Mr. Elliott will tell you from being a veteran of a couple of maybe not optimally managed ERP migrations, you need all hands on deck, your best thinkers, to make sure that goes smoothly. When you're not cutting the right checks to the right people, people aren't getting paid, when forms aren't being filed in a timely manner because your automated system, the backbone of your computer system, is not working, that is bad. And so the folks in the internal audit unit who do a lot of the compliance tests, who do a lot of the performance audits in our organization, they're going to be heavily involved in that. And it makes it a little bit more convenient to have them heavily involved from the Department of Finance versus my office.
Will this in any way impact our audit committee?
They should not know they should not recognize any difference other than the amount of staff that we will be bringing to them to really coach up the rest of the audit team to make sure that they have some presence and some opportunity to present on their own to the audit committee.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the relationship between the committee and the audit function remains unchanged by this ordinance. It's basically just transferring it over.
And I know this I may be overreaching the boundaries of the agenda item, but I just want to plant this in my colleagues' head, their minds. I'd like to look at how much it's going to cost to have our audit committee meetings televised. It's like the most, other than maybe Civil Commission, which is Civil Service Commission, which has a privacy issue associated with it, and I understand it's not being televised, but the audit committee meetings, as a sign of Glendale's financial transparency and transparency of the process of all the committee meetings, that's the one that should be televised, I think. So I'd like, am I going over what's on the agenda?
I think you can ask for that item to be agendized. We've had the discussion a couple times in the past, but obviously...
Yeah, I'd like to
I would
ask for
second
someone.
that.
Thank you. I think that'll give me the comfort zone to go ahead and vote for this item. And I'm assuming that when we have the discussion, my colleagues vote in support of that. So that's all I have to say.
Just an introduction.
I'm looking at Mr. Weaver because I was in a rush today a couple of times, and I apparently rushed his thoughts.
No, I think it was...
No malice whatsoever.
Just think, I think it was in 1997 that the internal audit position was created, and I think I cast the deciding vote to create it. One of my good votes.
Okay.
So did you want an ordinance introduced, or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll introduce it. And now, may I ask to be excused? I thought we would clearly be done by 8 o'clock tonight. I made an appointment.
Oh, certainly, Mr. Weaver.
Sorry. I didn't think it'd run that long.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Weaver. So, did you just introduce the ordinance? You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
thank you. I'm going to abuse my position as mayor and make a comment, personal comment. I'm not home, but my family is my wife's birthday, and I'm missing a family member's birthday, so happy birthday, Lori. I'm sorry. There we go. Next item, please.
Under hearings, 9A is Director of Community Development regarding zoning map amendment and SR zone development review to amend the zoning map located at 3067 East Chevy Chase Drive. 9A1 is an ordinance for introduction. This item is to be continued to March 24, 2015.
I'm going to abuse my authority, too. And if you permit me, I don't think an I'm sorry is going to cut it. I hope you've got some flowers or some jewelry or something like that. Just...
It's not good. Yeah, I should have done this at council comments and got carried away with the 4-year-old. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That needs a motion to continue to that date certain without further public notice.
I will move to continue it to March 24th, 2015.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Do we need a vote?
Yes,
We
please.
do. Okay, well, maybe we have the roll call, please.
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver? Mayor Sinanian.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
9B is Director of Community Development and Public Works regarding amendments to Title 8 and 12 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995 relating to sidewalk dining and street vacation procedures. AB1 is an ordinance for introduction.
Thank you. Mr.
Sorry,
Ochoa?
and I meant 9B1.
9B1.
Yes, sir. We will have our principal planner, Laura Stotler, come forward and give you a brief presentation of some of the refinements and modifications we wish to make to the sidewalk dining program. I think you will see most everything here is rather innocuous, but certainly because it affects an ordinance, we need to come to council and ask your permission to introduce this item as an ordinance. Laura?
Thank you, Mayor Sinani and members of the council. This is a request to update some of our standards for sidewalk dining. Sidewalk dining is under Title 12. That's a street section. What we want to do is have amendments that really reflect our current practice. We've had a number of amendments in our zoning code over the years. We haven't updated the outdoor dining section. Some of the main things we've had are such as the DSP, where we encourage people to have outdoor life. We want to have restaurants, a lot of active streets. So we really want to amend our sidewalk dining to reflect that. As part of the amendments, we're clarifying that sidewalk dining is in the right-of-way. That would be the public right-of-way along the sidewalk, not outdoor dining, which we're defining as being on private property. Right now, there's sometimes a confusion in code enforcement between the two, so this is an attempt to clarify that. Sidewalk dining permits, we also want to make sure that they're non-transferable, so if anybody comes in with a change of business, we make sure everybody's on board and is aware of the codes that apply. We're also putting updates to safety clearances, we're prohibiting smoking in sidewalk dining areas, and we're providing updates to insurance requirements to meet current city standards. We're also changed our code to make sure we have a clear path of travel on adjacent sidewalks and paseos to meet ADA requirements. We're also doing updates for sidewalk dining, and we're expanding the uses where alcohol may be served. So we've included all types of restaurants, if it's restaurants with counter service, full service restaurants, as well as fast food. And we're also adding taverns to that. For furnishings, we're actually asking to increase the height to 42 inches. Right now it's 36 inches. That will allow a greater variety of items to be placed out on a public right-of-way. Right now, for instance, areas such as there's a wine bar which is down on Harvard as a nice outdoor dining area. While most of the railing is 36 inches, you do have pilasters and things that are a bit higher. Also, sometimes you would have a podium like this for waiting table, we're seating people. We want to make sure that we're accommodating that. We're also amending Title 8, again, to be consistent. We're clarifying the outdoor dining provisions, private property versus right-of-way. Again, sidewalk dining areas are in right-of-way. We're also closing a loophole because right now it's not clear where what areas count toward outdoor dining areas for purposes of the smoking ordinance. People sometimes use the sidewalk area in as part of their private property, although it's not. It's public right-of-way. We're also adding cross-references in the smoking ordinance to the outdoor dining section in Title 12. And again, we're clarifying no smoking in sidewalk dining areas. And I just want to also clarify, we're not making any changes to smoking rules on private property, just in the public right-of-way. We're also looking at Title 12, another section that hasn't been updated for a while. It relates to conformance with the general plan findings when we have any kind of street or alley vacation. Right now, every time we have a separate hearing that goes before the Planning Commission to make that finding, we're proposing streamlining if that street vacation or an alley cutoff or something like that is associated with another project, such as many of the projects we have in downtown. At the time the project is considered, we'll also consider the vacation of the street or alley.
And if we don't have any other type of entitlement, and if it clearly is just a vacation, then we would have the Planning Commission continue to make that finding of conformity with the general plan. And there's another provision in state law where if we have an ordinance dealing with minor vacations, we can exempt that finding. So we are proposing a section that would exempt those minor vacations from making a conforming finding. And those would be things like corner cutoffs, minor street widenings, that sort of thing, curb cuts. That's what we're looking at. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Stadler. I'll open the public hearing. Any questions or comments? Ms. Friedman?
I'm glad you're clarifying the smoking, because I've seen restaurants that are allowing people to smoke on the sidewalks in their dining areas, so I'm glad to see that that will be clearly prohibited. I'm also glad to see the widening of the allowance of alcohol in the outdoor dining.
Okay, thank you. There appears to be nothing else. No cards from the public.
That's good.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. If someone will move the item.
I'll move the item.
Introduce. Oh, introduce. I'm sorry.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
Okay. And it is introduced. Next item, please.
Next item on the agenda is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And the city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and report.
Thank you. And we have a number of speakers. I'd like to start with Roland Feuer, followed by Richard Lieboff.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Roland Feuer. My wife and I have lived in the Chevy Chase Canyon for 16 years, and we overlook the Chevy Chase Country Club. I would like to comment on the precise plan of design process and how this is a bigger issue than just the proposed Chevy Chase Country Club zone change and expansion. The purpose of the PPD process, as I understand, is to consolidate all variances, conditional use permits, parking reduction permits, etc., that a developer needs for a project, and the public hearings associated with these permits into one hearing. The process is more efficient for the city and the developer. This process may be good in theory in that they can be considered together in one case, but the process is being used to fast-track difficult and significant projects such as the Chevy Chase Country Club zone change. The concern is, will all aspects of these projects be fully considered? And are they transparent to those outside of the developer and the planning department? There's been a great deal of confusion as to what is being considered. The role of the Planning Commission needs to be clarified. In this case, the Planning Commission was confused as they were voting on two motions, leading one commissioner to ask, do we do this? Furthermore, even though it is called a decision on the city website, the Planning Commission is only voting on a recommendation to the council, which cannot be appealed as would normally be allowed. Public discourse is certainly efficiently reduced. The zone change, the Chevy Chase Estates Association stated on its Facebook page that this is not a zone change. And board members have repeatedly stated that this is not really a zone change when in fact it is. Most important, the residents cannot get a clear picture of what is happening. This process abandons the traditional process, and there has been very little outreach and education of both residents and the Planning Commission. Compound this with the fast tracking of these projects, combined effects is that residents are being left in the dark. Supposedly, the PPD allows flexibility in zoning regulations while maintaining compliance with the Glendale General Plan. Well, with the proposed Chevy Chase project, there is a failure to follow the general plan. Does the general plan really consider placing commercial uses into a special recreation zone? Does the general plan really consider placing significant commercial uses into the low-density residential area of Chevy Chase Canyon? How is it that a public commercial establishment is considered a special recreation use? The Glendale Safe and Healthy Street Plan states, our goal is to make Glendale a better, safe place to walk or ride a bike. This proposed project has no pedestrian access from any direction. Really, there are no sidewalks anywhere around it. Does serving alcohol to the general public up at a windy Chevy Chase Canyon make sense to have safer streets? Does adding a large commercial use project in a high fire area, which shares a single access point for close to 300 homes, seem appropriate? Lastly, the noise element of the general plan states that no banquet hall can be within 200 feet of residential. However, this is completely ignored in this application. What makes this project unique enough to be considered as a PPD? Just because it would be easier process is not good enough. This is a bigger issue than the proposed zone change and expansion of Chevy Chase Country Club. The PPD process erodes the existing checks and balances of the traditional process, which has been tested and modified over many years. We should be asking, why are we using our low-density residential neighborhoods as a test bed for the PPD? It's a bigger issue than just this project. We are setting a bad precedent for a wave of these types of projects within our residential neighborhoods. I appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Foyer. Next speaker is Richard Leboff, followed by Richard Heimbold. Sorry if I butchered your last name.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Sinanian, other council members and the city staff. I am Richard Leboff, a 36-year resident of Glendale. The reason for my presence here this evening is that I wish to bring to your attention something that has been of concern to me for going on about the last year and a half. I was hoping that isn't Mr. Galanian. What I am going to bring before you is the fact that about a year and a half ago, when I was canvassing the Brockmont area for our historic district, I went to a number of homes, including ones on Kenneth Road. And those homes, there was one house in particular where an elderly couple brought to my attention that there has been a terrible problem, of course, with traffic and the fact that traffic goes too fast. And in addition, I think many of you probably have noted that there is no stop sign between Central Avenue and Pacific Avenue, which is approximately 3/4 to a mile. And that is a long stretch, of course, and in that stretch, people speed continuously. And what I have to say, of course, fits in very well with this evening's discussion about the need for traffic mitigation, the fact that we have a larger number of traffic accidents than we would like. I've never been able to get a handle on how many accidents actually occur at Valley View and Kenneth Road, which is the intersection at which I had hoped there would be by now, after a year and a half of advocating for this, for there to be a stop sign. I acknowledge that that is a difficult intersection because of the way in which the road jogs there, and that was brought to my attention by Wayne Coe. I'm not sure Wayne Coe is even still with the city. When I sent my recent email, and I think all of you got a copy of my email at the end of February, Wayne did not respond to it. As a result, I then sent an email to Mr. Galanian, who also unfortunately did not respond, even though he has in the past. To date, I have sent, regarding this issue, 9 emails. So I told Mr. Galanian last week that if I did not hear from him, I would appear before the City Council to highlight it and bring it to your attention, because I do think it's an issue that we need to deal with. There are many streets, as we all know, in Glendale that face this problem, including Highland, as was mentioned earlier. But Kenneth, of course, is a wider street. It's a street that there is a tendency for people to go very fast, and this particular intersection of Kenneth and Valley View has been troublesome for a very long time. There's a palm tree there. It's very hard. The visibility there is very bad. And I understand, and I'm sure that Mr. Garcia maybe has been consulted about this, because there are some right-of-way issues. But I'm sure sure there have been right-of-way issues in other intersections in Glendale before. That is not something new to Glendale. So I would urge that you, Mr. Ochoa, make sure that this item is handled and that we see an earlier rather than later resolution. Since there was I am up here, and though I am of the Jewish faith, although I am not an observant Jew, but in past years I have brought this to the council's attention, and I think I wish to do so again this evening. You know, each year, and I commend the Armenian community for having days of recognition and so forth, but as a Jewish person, I think that this should go beyond just the Armenian community. And I think that we should also be recognizing the World War II Jewish Holocaust, which of course not only affected Jewish people, it affected other types of people as well. And the days of remembrance for this year for the Jewish Holocaust, I looked them up on my cell phone. They're April 12th through the 19th. So I don't know whether it takes a motion or whether you can somehow do this, maybe next week's meeting, but I would urge that you also recognize the Jewish Holocaust as well, because it is a significant event in our history in which 6 million Jews went down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leboff, and I'll be happy to entertain such a resolution. Yeah. Of course.
I'd like to make a comment. In the last few months and last year, I had the opportunity to walk on Kenneth Road. And a lot of the homeowners there have asked for a stop sign somewhere along there because it is a wide expanse with no stopping. And I witnessed speeding. I also witnessed the police officer giving a ticket. So I know that the police are out there and they're trying their best, but I think whenever you have a long expanse like that and it's a wide street, that a lot of people are tempted to go a little bit over the speed limit. So I would like to see something, some sort of feasibility study done on that street.
I apologize for Mr. Golani, and he could not be here tonight, but I did brief with him on this very topic today, to the extent that there is an issue with the palm tree and there's a reluctance by a property owner to trim it, and that may create an issue of sightline visibility. The degree of the length of the stretch between traffic controls, we will be reaching out to the neighbors to make sure that if we move forward with a stop sign, that's a stop sign that the community wants to see, in addition to being warranted.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Next speaker is Richard Heimbold. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. Followed by Annie Reed.
I have copies of my comments.
Very well. Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, you got my name right. Not many people do.
Oh, okay, good.
Anyway, thank you, Mayor Sinanian and council members. My name is Richard Heimbold. I live near the Chevy Chase Country Club, and I'm here to weigh in on a plan to rezone and modify the country club. I'm against the zone change and the project as it is currently proposed. The main difference between the current members-only club and the proposed one is that there will be a new 260-person banquet hall that is open to the public. There's also a bar and restaurant that can accommodate another 1,400 patrons that is also open to the public. These changes triple the size of the country club building to 30,000 square feet. This, by the way, this is a blockbuster change up in our communities. I'll describe it in a couple paragraphs. Of course, there are numerous questions related to noise, traffic on a single road that provides access to approximately 300 homes in our area and also to the country club. There's a little choke point and homes that go to the left, and a country club has driveways to the right. I'd like to take a look at Chevy Chase Drive. Chevy Chase Drive is a two-lane road through a low-density residential area. So if you start on the flat land of Harvey Drive here on this side of it and go north. It goes about 5.6 hilly miles to La Cañada where it straightens out again. Now, in a span of 5.6 miles, there are no commercial businesses except for one little cafe, which is currently closed. Okay, now to get from here in Glendale up to the country club, when you start going uphill, there's a 1.9 mile drive of continuous curves. There's 18 curves in it to get up to the Chevy Chase Country Club. If you come from the other direction from La Cañada, I counted them, it's up in the 50s or so. It's a lot of curves. Now imagine 100 or 200 cars driving down Chevy Chase Drive after the last call at the club. That's a lot of traffic in places that serve alcoholic beverages. And this will happen twice every weekend, plus during the week at some lower volume. Now, my wife and I, have lived there 27 years. We've been members of the country club and spent a lot of time playing golf and enjoying the swimming pool with our granddaughters. Our canyon is quiet and peaceful, but it has special problems related to noise reflection of amplified music. And anybody who lives up there can tell you, they want to be out on their terrace or their balcony having dinner, and you just get blown away practically by somebody having a party or an event in the country club today. I've reviewed the city's plan and don't think the noise issues and the traffic are addressed properly. We need a full environmental impact report. This report should look closely at the traffic choke point that I mentioned. It's a very short road of about 100 feet, no sidewalks. There's a lot of pedestrians walking up and down there, as well as cars that go up to the neighborhoods of about 300 homes. And then there will be cars going in that same little street into the country club. Now, when you have an event and a surge of cars come up, 100 or 150 cars, they're going to go up to the stop sign and take a left and go into this little choke point, try to get in there. There's big questions raised about emergency vehicles. We're in a high fire danger area, another factor. So this report should look closely at the traffic choke point, which I mentioned, and the site of the country club driveways. Another concern I have is the zoning change. If it's implemented, and this change happens, the door is open for additional development of the area where the golf course is now. Now, the golf course is a small golf course. It's a marginal, doesn't have enough members, it's losing money. A golf club membership is down, there's a water crisis and all the rest of it. It's conceivable that the golf course would end up not being a golf course anymore. But what you have is you have a 35-acre patch of green space, and it's a gem of the Glendale landscape, and it must be protected. It should be left as a special recreational zone to make it as hard as possible to wreck its beauty with unwise development. You get a PPD in there, things move faster, they get fast-tracked, you could have a problem. I see the red light's on, so I'm going to stop. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
This is not a portion where we ask questions. I'll just thank you for your comments, and we'll move on to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sir. Annie Reed, followed by Mike Mohill.
Mr. Mayor, before the next speaker, because I just want to make sure that we're advising the speakers that obviously they're free to speak tonight, but they have these comments. It's recommended that they obviously speak at the public hearing on this item in a couple of weeks so that they be made part of the record on that item. Thank you.
Of course. I mean, when we're going to have a hearing on this specific matter, and we're welcome you to be part of that hearing.
And we will be there.
Great.
Okay. So thank you. Hello and welcome. Thank you for having us do this. My name is Annie Reed, and my husband Dennis Reed and I have lived at 1646 Golf Club Drive since 2003. Our home is number 94 in Glendale's Residential Historic Preservation Program. The City of Glendale recognized the historical significance of our home and other such home in Chevy Chase estates. I bring this up because it is important for the mayor and council members to have a keen awareness of the fact that the Chevy Chase Country Club is a private club, and that the proposed rezoning changes it from a private club to a club with commercial use, such as a bar, serving alcoholic drinks to the public, increased size for restaurants and banquet halls, and all evening. We have heard how special Glendale is. So the increased frequency and intensity of commercial use in a low-density residential neighborhood with valuable historical significant homes is of great concern to us and to our neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Mike Mohill, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Is this oral communication?
Yes, it is. It's that time of night.
Okay.
Or evening. It's still evening, I guess.
Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
My name is Mike Mohill. Part 2, Legacy of Councilman Dave Weaver. Last week before this council, Councilman Dave Weaver stated he was not alone when he voted 18 years ago to change the pension benefits for safety personnel, fire and police, from 75% of their last year's salary to 90% of their last year's salary for life. In addition, safety personnel would no longer have to work to the age of 55, but to the age of 50. A 15% pay raise for life, and could not retire 5 years earlier. Additionally, these benefits were also retroactive for previously retired city employees. Mr. Weaver, the Public Employees Union favorite candidate, stated 2 or 3 other council members would also have had to approve the increases in salary and pension benefits. Mr. Weaver is correct. However, as the pension liabilities have grown to become a tsunami, Councilman Weaver kept approving pay raises and bonuses. Unfunded pension liabilities have grown from less than $200 million in 1997, when Weaver just got elected, to $1.4 billion today. As the tsunami pension crisis continued to crescendo, Mr. Weaver has done little or nothing to change our unsustainable and unfunded pension obligations. Since we do not have the money in order to leave the city employees' corrupt pension system CalPERS, it will cost the taxpayers about $2.4 billion in bond debt. City Manager Ochoa, in his sleight of hand magic show in my discussion of the unrestricted city reserves, money a family would use in case of an emergency. I stated when Mr. Weaver became a councilman, we had more than $500 million in unrestricted reserves, and today it's less than $40 million. Mr. Ochoa, I was talking in dollars and cents, and you chose, again as always, to mislead and confuse the council and the public in talking percentages. The undeveloped hills in Chevy Chase Canyon were purchased about 10 years ago for about $40 million. Mr. Ochoa, please, can you please itemize where the rest of the $500 million of the unrestricted reserve money went? How about the $500 million was transferred? How much of that, was transferred to pay the corrupt CalPERS union employees' salaries and pensions for which Mr. Weaver voted? Mr. Weaver's slogan is "Leave it to Weaver," and look what we have today. City Manager Ochoa gave us another Oscar-winning performance last week in defending Councilman Weaver when he said, quote, "We do not have $1.4 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. We have $1.4 billion liability and $1 billion in assets, and therefore we have only $400 million in unfunded liabilities." Wow. Excuse me, Mr. Ochoa. To what finance or accounting school did you go? No council member challenged your fuzzy math. As always, you pulled the wool over council's eyes and the public. City Manager Ochoa, since when do assets cover liabilities? When I took accounting classes, Cash covered liabilities and not assets. Has the accounting board changed its rules or terminology? As the tsunami pension crisis looms, fees and taxes have increased throughout the city. Expected city services are dramatically reduced. Mr. Ochoa uses fuzzy math to pay the $1.4 billion liability. He must be prepared to sell our assets like City Hall, GWP, police and fire stations, parking structures, libraries, museums, and then lease them back to the taxpayers, our assets. Mr. Ochoa, let's be honest with the public. We are financially upside down, and you are deliberately misleading the council and the public, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohill.
Just for that Emily Latella moment that Mr. Mohill is about to experience, we actually have the $1.1 billion there in terms of the deposits that are made to PERS. Over all these years, we're making all of these payments to PERS. PERS invests them in a portfolio. So there are assets, liquid assets with PERS to offset the amount of liability that we talk about. He's talking about the actual fixed assets of buildings and capital and property and everything else, which ironically enough is about, I want to say it's about a $1.5 billion. So I think he's confusing those two numbers, but no, there's assets of $1.1 million or $1.1 billion to go with the $1.49 billion in liabilities. And it's worth noting that in 2000 you were superfunded. What Mr. Mohill leaves out is that you went through the greatest recession since the Great Depression. That impacted PERS. PERS lost funding in their portfolio. That's why they have increased their rates. That's why you have liabilities that outstrip assets, but those liabilities only come due if everyone walked out the door right now, right this moment, and we had to write that check. So it's the fuzzy math that just doesn't quite add up for Mr. Mohill.
Very well. Yes, Mr. Najarian.
May I suggest that you and Mr. Mohill have a cup of coffee somewhere and you, in a calm manner.
If I thought it would help, sir, I probably would at least consider it.
Away from the glare of the lights, because he gets the numbers wrong quite frequently.
Yeah, he does.
And he does take up time, and I feel sorry for him. It's like an Ali Frazier moment when Ali comes off the ropes and takes care of Joe. But I'm sure I'm being partially facetious. But I know you have offered an opportunity to speak to him. And
when he would speak to me, I think we did speak at one point, but there's a narrative there that he's trying to sell that doesn't really get in the way of the facts. So.
Okay. Very
Thank
well.
you for
1.1 billion in liquid assets. Ms. Hammond.
Evening. Mayor Sinanian, members of the City Council, staff, and audience. I see Mr. Weaver took off, so that's okay. What the heck. My name is Margaret Hammond. As I said, I've been a longtime resident of South Glendale. Actually, I live in the shadow of the cross on Forest Lawn. Wonderful place to live, I'll tell you. And I've enjoyed it. So my main thing, one of my main things, is the bulky item pickup. And the number being 818-548-3916. The reason I talk about this is a quality of life thing. And it can affect the quality of life of people in our area, because if they keep dumping that stuff out on the right of way and it doesn't get picked up for a couple of weeks at a time, it sure doesn't add to the quality of life of the area. For instance, one apartment in the 1200 block of Boynton has had junk out there for 3 weeks. I don't know why, but it's still sitting there. And as for pedestrians in the road, I live on the top of the hill, which also has a curve, and it's dark. It has lights, but it's not real well lit. And people will walk down the road at night. And, they look at you like, well, why are you honking me? Don't I have a right here? No, You're supposed to walk on the sidewalks, and I'm supposed to drive on the road. They wouldn't like it if I drove on the sidewalks, would they? So I think the whole trouble with a lot of pedestrians in the city is their sense of entitlement. They think, I'm a pedestrian, I can walk anywhere I want, and just disregard the lights, disregard everything, and that's why we have a lot of accidents. I know, because I drive around Glendale all the time, and particularly in the south end of the area. And dealing with it can be really scary. And bicyclists, they'll just go right across on a red light in front of you, and you have the green light, and there they are, zipping across in front of you. What are you supposed to do? What do they want? Is suicide? Or do they just want to have a lawsuit so they can sue you? You know, the other thing is, you know, these reports that come out on water and power usage are absolutely garbage, stupid, because all they do is add to the costs of the city. The report is done by an outside agency, and I get 3 of them at a time. Well, maybe I get more than that, because I have more than one property, and it's absolutely idiotic. I mean, what the heck good is it going to do? They're reporting on what I've already used and whatever, and what I'm supposed to be using. But again, if that money were saved and put back, maybe we wouldn't have to up our electric and water rates. I mean, it's just totally stupid having all that junk mail, as I call it. It adds to my mail that I have to throw in the trash and recycle it, probably. Okay, that's my one thing. Now, the Rose Float, there is a group forming, and it's called the Rose Float Committee. They are meeting at the Brethren Church, which is at 636 North Pacific, every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. If you're interested, people out there, in having a Rose Float, which we didn't have on our 100th anniversary, then you can call the people. I think they have their ad in the news press every week as to where they meet and what time and so forth. So that's something I thought I should bring out. I did attend the meeting, and they are in the process of having to go through all those hoops and everything else to get the committee formed and be legal and so forth. So, and they're all seem like a pretty good group. They're not all old like me. A lot of them are very young, or much younger. And but you know, a lot of us old ones want to see that float. I mean, after all, 100 years of having that as one of our things that we can be proud of. We were proud of having it, and I even rode on it one year. So I really feel that we should have another Rose Float this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. And that is the last speaking card, so we'll complete this portion of the hearing. What's next?
Mr. Mayor and Council, if there's no new business, just a motion to adjourn in memory of Elsie Manukin Krikorian.
Yes, we will adjourn if we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second, we're adjourned in the memory of Elsie Krikorian.